All right, welcome everyone. Hopefully everyone can see our two fantastic workshop leaders here on the screen. First, before I introduce them, I'm going to go through just a couple of just general logistics of using GoToWebinar, since this might be the first time for some of you. So right now, you will be able to hear me. Again, this is Stuart Luther. I'm the program director for Midwest and Ohio River Valley. This isn't about me tonight. So you'll be able to hear us, and you'll also be able to hear the two folks that I'm about to present to you, but they can't hear you right now. So don't worry about muting yourself or anything. But if you do have a question, we encourage you to ask it, and there's a couple ways that you can do that. You can either click the raise hand button right there on your GoToWebinar control panel, or you can type it in the chat box that's there. And then once I see that, I'll either be able to unmute you if you have your hand raised, or I'll read out the question to be answered by our great panelists. So without further ado, I'll go ahead with some introductions. We have Kami and Tracy here from ProCon.org that are going to walk you all through some debate development, and I'll give them the opportunity to present what their organization is and kind of their role in that and their history in education and civics. But just want to thank both of you for being here and working with our fantastic students and helping them along the way. So I'll let you guys take it from there.
Thank you for that intro, Stuart. Much appreciated. We'll give a little bit of background about who we are, and then we have some information we'd like to share about ProCon, and then talk a lot more about Junior State, why it's so important, why the debate directors in particular are such a key role in that organization, not just for that organization, but for our country in general. I totally get what makes your role so special and important. But before I do that, I wanted to make sure you get a chance to meet Tracy. I've had the pleasure of working with her for over 10 years now. And rather than steal all her thunder, if I can, I'd like to ask Tracy to say a few words about her role at ProCon and how she has interacted with JSA over the years.
Hi, I'm Tracy DeFrancesco. I've been with ProCon.org for over 10 years now, just a little shy of Kami's tenure, so we have our staff tends to stay for a long time because we really love what we do. If you haven't heard about ProCon.org, we're a website. We have over 50 topics of controversial issues. We present both sides. So we don't care which side you come down on. We just want you to be informed in your opinion, and we facilitate that by giving you the pros and the cons on these topics, such as medical marijuana, school uniforms, illegal immigration, the death penalty, every kind of topic that you can think of. I did my undergrad at Pepperdine University, and my master's in public policy at UCLA. And I'm always happy to go back in the summer to UCLA to help out with the JSA seminar that Kami runs there. So I've met a lot of JSA students there and just really impressed with how engaged you all are. And so we hope we can help you out today with the debate topics.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks, Trace. You know, it's for 9 years in a row, we've worked at the Gene Bird Symposium, the Institute on Politics, and we do a 90-minute critical thinking seminar. And for us, it's one of the highlights of the year. You know, ProCon serves 27 million people every year. It's a pretty big audience. We do a lot of events. We interact with a lot of really cool people. But honestly, one of our favorite groups to work with is Junior State for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons is, selfishly, I was a Junior State person. I was the chapter president at Torrance High School for 2 years back in 1990 and 91. And the chapter went from 20 students to over 100 students. I was so happy about that. I got really involved in SoCal State and ran for mayorship, lost. I was an Angeles representative. I did win that one. I went to the Stanford Summer School. Any of you have gone to Stanford or any of the JSA summer schools, woot. It was such a transformative experience for me. I thought Junior State was where I learned to find my voice, to give a care about politics, to learn how to negotiate with other people on issues that I was very passionate about and didn't want to negotiate on. And for me, it helped launch my interest in something that is now my career, and that's looking at issues from both sides at ProCon. A lot of people I've met over the years who have been involved in junior state have similar stories. We work with them a lot, and I can't say enough good things about JSA and how awesome of an organization I think it is. In a lot of ways, what you're doing as debate directors is very similar to what we're doing. You are creating a space where people can debate, discuss, exchange ideas on some of the hottest topics of our day. You're doing it without regard for what conclusions those people come to, and you're doing it with regard to what's important in our country, helping people shape their voice, helping people think critically, and helping people have a wonderful experience in their lives so they can become civically engaged well after high school. Good on you guys for doing that. It's so important. Not enough people are doing it. Not enough adults are doing it. Not enough people who are paid professionally are doing it. You're doing it on a volunteer basis because you care. And I think that's wonderful and should be celebrated. If we don't get a chance to say this by the end of our talk today, I'm completely accessible to all of you listening right now. I know Tracy feels the same way. Guys, call us, email us. If you have questions about what we're doing, you want career advice, you want to know what topics to pursue, you want to know what's hot in what parts of the state, you want to know how to phrase a question, we're very, very open to this. We have every interest in helping junior state succeed because your success is our nation's success. So that said, let me get off my soapbox a bit and show you a little bit about what we've been working on here at ProCon. I'm going to share a couple of screens here with you. Some of it's going to be information you may or may not know. And the first screen that I'm sharing with you, I hope you can see this, is a statistic that reflects a survey that was conducted in the 1960s where researchers asked Americans how they would feel if their son or daughter married someone of a different political ideology. At the time, a long time ago now, 50 years, 4% of Democrats, 5% of Republicans said they'd be upset if their son or daughter married someone of their opposite political ideology. They didn't care, basically. 2008, that number increased a lot. 2010, the last time the survey was done, that number was up to 33% for Democrats, 49% for Republicans. It's an alarmingly high number. I don't know if you can picture your parents being mad at you for dating or being interested in someone from a different political ideology. But whether they admit it or not, these are what survey numbers are showing. It's reflecting polarization in our country. There's another graph that you'll see on the right, which is a reflection of party polarization. And what's interesting is this graph starts in 1879, just a few years after the end of the Civil War, where you would think our nation was as divided as it's ever going to be. And you look at where it is as of 2009 when this graph ends, and we passed those levels. And that was really alarming and disturbing. So if it feels like polarization's at an all-time high, it's probably because it is. And the result of that is the person at the bottom of this screen here, where it feels like someone's shouting into a megaphone in your ear. And oftentimes the people who shout the loudest are the ones who know the least, right, about the issues. The problem with all that is not just that it's annoying, it's that the results of this type of culture are alarmingly threatening for our democracy. We are in a period where our voter registration, roughly 1 out of 2 people are registering, and out of them, roughly 1 out of 2 are voting in a presidential election cycle. For your local elections, like I said, I live in Torrance. In Torrance, California, people were patting themselves on the back because we passed 20% voter turnout. That's pathetic. People are not voting for a lot of reasons. Part of it is they're disengaged. They don't care. They feel like they're just getting shouted at. They feel like they don't understand these issues. They feel like they can't understand these issues. People feel kind of like this guy does. You're hearing competing messages. You don't know what to think. And what we want to feel is not so much like this image of this dysfunctional Thanksgiving dinner conversation. We want to feel like the other image where you're exchanging ideas over a cup of coffee. You're really engaged, looking each other in the eye, and able to disagree without being disagreeable. I had one person, a former pro hockey team owner, said, Kami, the way I think about it is, I don't think you're an a-hole, I just think you're wrong. And I think he summed it up so nicely, perhaps roughly, but so nicely. It's not that I think you're a jerk, it's that I just think you're wrong. I think that's the right attitude that we are trying to instill, and I know that you are doing through your programs. Here's some inspirational quotes for some thought leaders throughout our civic history, basically echoing what you know so well, that we need to look at both sides, that learning how to be an effective citizen is not something you're born with, it's something that you have to learn, something you have to do. Democracy is an active verb. And it's something that we need for our system to function at all. So ProCon exists for all these reasons. We exist for the same reason that you do what you do. We exist to help people understand both sides of issues. We've done this for, like Tracy said, 50 plus different issues over the course of the 13 years of our history. We've served over 140 million people since we started. We're used by approximately 10,000 schools in all 50 states, 90 different countries. If you didn't know it, you can click a button and translate ProCon into 100 different languages. That's on the bottom left of all our pages. It's a machine translation, but depending on language, it's usually not bad. As you can tell from ProCon and your own experiences with it, the point of what we do is give people a brief background of the issue. We give them pro and con arguments, all sourced, so it's completely transparent. It's free, there's no registration requirements. And then we give them quotes and arguments. And let's say someone reads this quote from Lindsay Marshall about animal experimentation, and they think, who the heck's Lindsay Marshall? Why should I care? They can click on the words Lindsay Marshall and see biography that Tracy and Jeff and Kate and Natalie are other researchers that they work on. So this is hard work to do. This issue of animal experimentation took us 400 hours to build and launch. And then after it's launched, try it right now. Type in animal testing into Google and see where ProCon ranks. We're probably at or near the top of the rankings organically, not paid. So we have a real responsibility, so we have to be current with all these topics. That's part of what we do is the research. We also go to the junior state conventions. We go to as many fall states, spring states as we're invited to. We moderate debates. We just moderated 7 debates over the last 4 weeks. It was very exhaustive, but it was awesome. We create lesson plans for educators. We go directly to classrooms and do critical thinking seminars. We write articles. We're a Google News provider. We do headline articles that come out every week. We train teachers. We do professional development programs. We engage voters. We chase after presidential candidates to find out their views on 75 different issues, and we present that to the world. We put up a quiz where you can answer the same questions that the candidates have answered and see how you match up, sort of like a Match.com or a Tinder for candidates. That's the nature of what we do, and the reason why, really, I guess 2 words, is critical thinking. Critical thinking is considered a vital life skill, and people are not learning it necessarily in their classrooms. They're learning it through programs like Junior State from their experiences on sites like ProCon. So, of course, we encourage you all to visit ProCon. We have had a long and awesome relationship with the folks at Junior State. We want to maintain it and grow it. And if we can help you personally, please don't hesitate to ask. But what we want to do next is show you a little bit more about our debate topics, how we come up with our questions, what's hot right now, and then, of course, be able to answer whatever questions that you might have for us as folks who are probably very familiar with ProCon and what it is that we do. How did I do, Trace? Did I leave out any important points in that intro?
No, I think it's good.
Okay, great. Folks, by the way, if you have any questions as we're talking, just type them out. Raise your hand at any point. We're not standing on formalities here. Just chime in. You have a lot of insights that I personally, and I know Tracy is very interested in learning about. What are the topics you feel are really resonating with students? I'll give you an example. 2 years ago at the Montezuma conference, we asked the incoming JSA governors what topics did they think we should focus on. And we gave them a list of 10, that we thought were interesting, and they said, no, none of those 10. We suggest something different. And 2 years ago, they said the topic should be affirmative action. Is that still a hot topic, do you think, for students today? Or has the conversation shifted to other things? I'm very curious, from your point of view, what are the hot topics? I'll show you some of our hot topics. What you're looking at right now is Google Analytics. This is the back end of the ProCon website, and this is representing a time period from October the 1st to yesterday, and it's ranking the pages on our site in order of popularity. It gives other metrics too and other numbers. I'm not really going to focus on that. I just wanted you to see what's popular. Number 1 is our homepage. Number 2, gun control. Number 3, a debate topics page, which is basically an alternate version of our homepage. Number 4 is the national anthem and the protests around that. Obviously very topical, hugely popular right now. Next topic on the list is animal testing. Middle schoolers love this topic. We thought it would be moderately popular. It has stayed consistently in our top 10. I remember debating it as well as a junior in high school about animal testing. It's an all-star. When you're doing your your convention programming, sometimes it feels stale to go after these debates that we keep having. But I tell you, for me at the time, it was really useful because I didn't know about some of the more sophisticated topics. I just wanted something that I could maybe more ad-lib on, and so I went up as a supporting speaker for that topic, and I felt like I could at least work my way through it without deep pre-existing knowledge. So to whatever degree you can, I just caution to not necessarily rule out the all-stars, and animal testing, at least in our experience, has been a real popular one. Abortion, of course, is always popular. That one is a tougher issue to debate using facts and information. There's a lot of it that are moral arguments and should arguments, and trying to ascribe feelings to fertilized eggs and things that we really have very little scientific knowledge about. It's a tough debate to have, I guess, is what I'm saying, where facts don't often matter. But it is very popular, so we have tons of information about that. Medical use of marijuana, certainly very popular. It's now not so much about whether or not marijuana has medical value. It's really variations of that debate, which might be maybe recreational use marijuana, whether or not there should be an age limit for medical use, whether or not CBD or the non-psychoactive ingredients in marijuana should be legal nationally, whether it should be declassified or reclassified out of Schedule 1 into Schedule 2 or 3. It's a more nuanced argument now, I should say, rather than just medical use. School uniforms, that's another one that middle schoolers love to talk about. We would not have done it at all, but enough middle school teachers told us you should do it, and we could look at what people are typing into the ProCon search engine, which is this search bar on the top right of the page. When we look at the top 20 issues that are typed in there, school uniforms kept showing up on that list. And when we looked at it for a one-year period, school uniforms was in our top 10. We thought, okay, we got to do it. People are at ProCon looking for it. We got to do it. So that's how that ended up there. Death penalty, of course, is an all-star. Within death penalty, we don't just look at is it good or bad. We also look at death penalty versus life in prison without parole. We look at whether our criminal justice system is racially disproportionate, and if so, why. We look at whether money matters more than guilt in the death penalty cases. We look at whether or not physicians should participate in executions. We look at many other issues, I'll say about 20 others. And if you go to deathpenalty.procon.org, you can see what some of those more nuanced discussions on the death penalty are. Vaccines is our next most popular. Vaccines in general is not so controversial. What is perhaps more controversial is whether or not vaccination should be mandatory. There was many states that had exceptions, personal belief exemptions, religious exemptions, and medical exemptions. And many of the states are doing away with the personal exemptions rules. And because of that, there's some controversy around it. Usually, older, more left-leaning parents are the ones who are really pushing this issue. I don't know how popular it'll be for your conventions, but for us anyways, it's a popular one. Minimum wage is one that keeps coming up, particularly for younger folks, first jobs, working minimum wage, and whether that's enough to support anything, and much less for people who are graduating college and going and taking minimum wage jobs and working in the gig economy. It's a popular topic. It's a really well-researched site, but it's not a top 10 most popular for us. 13 is social networking. That one is the one we've been doing our symposium about, and it's really popular. People will walk into the debate with a preconceived idea about social media and say, yeah, it's terrific. It connects people. You know, I get to keep in touch with my friends. You know, what's bad about it? You know, it's awesome. And then we start digging into the cons, and there's cons for medical reasons and for criminal reasons and for taking pictures of yourself drunk at a party when you're 15 and that's showing up when you're 25. People don't think about that stuff. And when they start hearing more of the cons, it becomes more of an interesting debate and discussion. So for me, I really like doing the social media topic because it draws people in and everyone has an opinion and it gets a lot of energy in the room. It's fun. And we could go on down the list. Death penalty, drinking age. That's a popular one, especially for high school students, whether or not we should lower it from 21 to 19 or 18 or 16. Euthanasia is increasingly popular. There's medical marijuana again, same-sex marriage, college education. College ed, by the way, that's, I think, a really important and under-discussed subject. Not education, whether that's valuable, of course it is, but whether or not college is the best vehicle to succeed in life. So what about vocational training? And all the many great middle-class jobs that are available that are not being filled because not enough people are going into those type of apprenticeships and vocational trainings. So I like
can I jump in, Kami, and talk about the broadness of the topic versus the specificness before we go away from that? So you see that some of these topics are really broad, like the death penalty. And Kami mentioned that our animal testing site, we spend about 400 hours doing. That for us is what we call a micro-site. So it's the core question, should animal testing be used for scientific or commercial purposes? And we just explore that question with other resources. The death penalty, like Kami mentioned, we got into several other questions underneath. It was such a broad topic that had all kinds of subtopics. But then you see something else that's at the top of the traffic that Kami just showed us was the pros and cons of whether athletes should kneel during the national anthem as a form of protest. And that is something that is just a one-page article that we do. It allows us to be really nimble and react to things that are happening in the news. So we did that. We did one recently for should books be banned? Should anyone be able to ban books? We did one last year about the pros and cons of Pokemon Go. And those are things that get heavy traffic when they're being talked about in the news versus something like death penalty and medical marijuana, which regardless of what's happening in the world, people are always caring about those topics. So I know when you guys are looking at keeping your topics broad versus getting more specific, we find that we can cover a lot of different nuanced positions when we have a broad question. And when we keep it specific, we can really drill into that area and give some good research.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I actually have one comment and one question. So Litsa says that your death penalty article is extremely helpful. So
yeah,
thanks for that. And then I've got one person who I'm going to unmute now, Weston, who would like to ask a question. Weston, you're unmuted.
Hi, my name's Weston. I'm the Ohio River Valley Governor in JSA. I've used ProCon on many occasions, I'll tell you that right now. But my question was, how do you sort of balance what people are searching, what people kind of want to talk about, with what you think maybe people should be talking about, or if there are issues that are really important that don't get as much attention? I know in JSA, foreign affairs, people oftentimes they have less background knowledge in that. So how do you kind of balance those two things?
So this is just my personal view on this. It's a tough question to answer, but it really depends, I think, on what your goals are. So for ProCon's goal is to stoke critical thinking and smash silos, create circles. We want people to become civically engaged by understanding other points of view, learning how other people think, and then discovering their own voice and being able to take civic action as a result of that afterwards. So we really need issues that will engage people. And that's why, like Tracy said, we did Pokemon Go, and we do kneeling for the anthem, and we do things that are really popular and relatable, social media. But your point is a really good one. There's some of our issues, and some being the minority of our issues, that were not really in the news, that were not really very popular, but that we knew was a real debate, and that our research would actually be very helpful. And one example of that was whether or not ex-felons should be allowed to vote. Right now, we've got approximately 6 million people in the country who can't vote, even though they're out of jail, out of parole, off probation, they paid their fines. Their state has restricted them from voting, and it's not a very well-known thing. And a lot of people don't care because they're not very sympathetic to felons. But that said, the numbers, like in the state of Florida, where you're talking about 10% of the electorate can't vote because of prior felony conviction, it's a remarkably high number for moving the needle on a presidential election. We talked about 535 votes between Bush and Gore, and we're talking now about, which is insignificant compared to the 10% who can't vote because of felony conviction. So anyway, we thought it was a really important issue that somebody needed to shine the light on it, and that somebody could be and should be us. So we decided to just go for it. But most of the time, and thank you for using ProCon and for your question, but I think most of the time we're thinking our goal is to engage, so we need to think broadly and think of how to bring people into the tent, mostly.
Yeah, we want to give people what they want, but also what they need, and where we can be of help in bringing both sides of the debate, especially places that are in debates that are in need of civil discourse. So something like the question of abortion, we come at that dispassionately, and we give you both sides, and we do the research, and we don't have a stake in it. We don't take a position on any of these issues. So that's a topic that can get really heated, that we kind of try to bring that civil discourse to. We also want to use our resources effectively. We have a small team in Santa Monica, and we want to reach as many people as we can with the work that we do.
I was looking at some of the, thank you, Trace, those are great points. Looking at some of the issues that are coming up in various conventions around the country for JSA, and some of these they're really specific questions that are being asked, and I'll give a couple of them. So for instance, Resolve self-promotional websites such as Spotify and YouTube have eliminated the need for talent to achieve success in the modern music industry. It's a very thoughtful and artfully worded resolution, and I'm sure you're going to get people arguing both sides of it. From the ProCon point of view, that question is one that is worded in a way that I think make it tougher for people to jump in and relate to the subject. Spotify and YouTube, boom, instant brand recognition, people know what they are, but it's kind of worded in a way that makes it seem like I can't participate, this seems a little too sophisticated, and so we try to ask questions in their simplest form, and a lot of times it seems counterintuitive because we want to have these really great, intelligent discussions and debates, and so we want the language to reflect that, but to the greatest degree possible, my advice is go simple. We want it to be relatable. That's what's going to matter more than anything else, is that students experience going through junior state, graduating from high school, now they're off in the world, and oh my goodness, they can vote. We want them to be engaged, and we want them to have had those experiences when they had these opportunities through GSA to engage with topics. So to whatever degree possible, I just say simplify, and that as an example of one that I'd say is in need of simplification. That's just my opinion, but I wanted to share at least our experience there. I am showing the rest of the ProCon screen here. This is our homepage, so you can see some of the topics that we have been focused on. Like Tracy was saying, there's certain topics that are in the news, and that's why we want to make them relevant to people when they're looking. So that's why we're doing National Anthem. last week, I believe it was Banned Books Week, and we wanted to take advantage of the fact that everyone's going to be, or at least more so than other times of the year, looking at banned books. So why don't we look at banned books too? And we did a pro and con about that, about whether or not should parents or other adults be able to ban books from schools and libraries. The issue of universal basic income, that one came up because Hawaii was the first state that said, hey, maybe we should study this, and their legislature approved a study on universal basic income. Just like Alaska has a program, Hawaii is thinking about making it to where everybody, regardless of income, get a check from the government for probably a couple $1,000 every year just for breathing. You get it just for being a resident of Hawaii. I don't know if they're going to do it, but they're examining it. And so we thought, that's an interesting idea. What do people say about it? So we started looking at the pros and the cons of universal basic income, only because it was relevant at the time. I'd say we have had, I'll show you the reader suggestions. We're up to 1,735 different suggested topics. Obviously, way more topics than we have time or resources to cover. So we're always in the position of asking ourselves whether or not this topic is debatable. Are people really looking for answers on this question? We want to know, do we have the capacity to do this properly? We don't just want to talk about it unless we can do it well. We want to ask, is this issue going to be one where by the time we're done doing our research, the issue will be over with and it'll be a who cares when we're done? We need to make sure the timing component of it works out. We've got approximately 15 criteria that we look at, and when you do that, still there's many, many topics that rise to the top of the list that are super important and interesting. So for those, we have to just use our own bias and say, what are you interested in doing? Who's free? Tracy, are you free to tackle this topic? What do you think? Here's our top 3 choices. What do you think? Sometimes we've asked our readers. We do a survey right on the site and have people vote on it. That's always a fun exercise as well. So it's tough. It's tough once you get to this point. But if it helps you, just know there's 1,700 possibilities waiting here on this sheet. And if you want to link to any of them, to any of the research that we've done on any of the ProCon sites, you don't need our permission. Just do it. You're welcome to it. If you want to reprint, meaning copy paste and put it on a different website, for that you do need permission, and you're welcome to email or call anytime to ask for it. Like I said, we want to help JSA as much as possible, and I really think these what the governors are doing and debate directors and the leadership. I mean, you're with the largest and the oldest student-run organization in the country. I mean, it's a tremendous honor, and I remember looking up to all the governors that I had the chance, the opportunity to meet over the years, and I've been so impressed with the people who get to those high levels of JSA. I'm being flattering because you guys really deserve it. I'm a super fan of what JSA is and does, and I hopefully have been able to gain some insights into how we structure debates and how we think about debates, and we're happy to keep this conversation going as long as it's useful to you. So I'll zip it and see if you guys have any questions, or if Tracy has other great insights to share that may be useful for you.
Let's see, are there any questions?
I do have some questions. They're coming in quick. Give me 1 second to catch up. All right, so I'm gonna unmute you guys as you come in. Just ask your question. So, Sydney, I've got you unmuted.
Okay, my question was, how do you encourage nuances and discussions in those broader topics?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd say in order to get to that level of nuance, it requires a level of knowledge. And a lot of times for tougher topics like foreign policy subjects, it's tough to get that nuance without some prior knowledge. To get to that level of knowledge, you either want to work with topics where people have existing knowledge, and for that I'd say something like social media or abortion or things where it's just much more in the ether. People are much more likely to have pre-existing knowledge coming into a debate. And if you can't do it that way, and you do want to tackle something that's a little headier, like North Korean nuclear weapons, then some information that you could share beforehand, I think, would be really useful, and it can up the level of discourse. So maybe it's creating a one-pager. Maybe it's sending over a recommended reading list. Maybe it's doing a briefing beforehand from an expert or a brief presentation. Here's some facts about the debates. When we held debates at the Santa Monica Pier in the last month, we asked our moderators spend 2 minutes giving us background, context, and information on this issue, just so that the audience would have any sense of why this debate is interesting, important, what's some context, what are the numbers, what's the big picture look like. So all those tactics, I think are fair game, but in general, it's tough. It's tough to go deep when the person really doesn't have any prior knowledge.
All right, we've got a few more questions. So right now it's showing as Evie, but I don't think it's her. I think it is Ambika.
Yeah, hey, hi, I'm Ambika Sinha, the National Director of Debate for JSA, and my question is that oftentimes, a lot of our debaters kind of fall on the same side of the aisle. So how do we create debate topics that are still relevant, but will spark a both pro and con approach?
One thing I found in building websites about topics is that I often go in thinking only one side could possibly have good arguments to support it, and then I come out realizing that I was totally wrong. So when I started building a website about should performance-enhancing drugs be allowed in sports, I thought, oh, who's going to make a decent argument about letting athletes use drugs to play sports? It sounds crazy. But what I found was that there actually were some compelling ways to approach that topic from the pro side, and that side actually had to fight harder to be more articulate about their position, whereas people on the con side just kind of tended to fall back on the drugs are bad. And we said, okay, but should they be allowed? Or they would say drugs are just not, they're banned, so we can't use them. Okay, but how do we really have a debate about this? So I think that you find, if you go into a debate kind of determined to see the other side from what you initially thought, that if you do the research, you will find that you can find compelling arguments on both sides.
Yeah, Trish, I completely agree. I think it's a great point, and I'll add to that part of it could be, and this is a tactic we use too, is the wording of the question or the resolution. If you word it in a way, for instance, is global climate change real? And everyone, or most everyone, is going to line up on the, well, yeah, it's real side, and you won't really have a debate. If you ask a different question that says, is global climate change at least 90% man-made? Tougher question. How do you line up on that one? That is one where just changing the words might make a difference. And then also, as a tactic, JSA has its very standard debate format, but you could do it for fun. Let's say your main debater on the pro side, you can require that they give a supporting argument on the other side, and they literally walk to the other side of the podium and they make an argument for the opposition side. I think something like that could, one, be fun, but two, it would make it to where you always have a counterpoint because that person would make sure of it. And then three, I think it would also model a little bit of civil discourse to show that there's something to be respected about the differing point of view, regardless of the subject.
Awesome, thank you. So our next question is a typed-in question, and I'll go ahead and just read it out loud. It's from Shahad, who's in the Ohio River Valley, and she asks, on the topic of polarization, some chapters have told me that their students are all leaning towards one ideology, and it's hard to debate current topics within their particular school, even though that is what students usually request to talk about. So I think she's looking for help in addressing that situation.
She and so many people in this country, it's really, really tough. People are in their echo chambers and they're so comfortable there, they don't want to come out. They don't want to talk to the other side. They don't want to acknowledge that the other side has anything interesting or useful or relevant to say. And it's often so hard to have those conversations. There's ways that it can be done. Teachers are really good about stoking exercises to get people to look at other points of view whenever either the minority is either silenced or bullied away from having those positions. Some of the tactics that they use and that I think seem like good tactics to me are assigning people, asking what's your view, and then assigning them the opposite side. That's good. They play something called musical chairs, philosophical chairs, that's it, where you don't know what side you're going to be on. You start walking around the lectern, and then the music stops, and wherever you're sitting, that's your side. And it will force people to have to articulate and argue a side that they don't necessarily agree with. Another way to do it is to ask the presenter, you make a pro argument, but also make a con argument. And they have to give both. And they have to give both of equal merit. And that whether or not the power of their arguments, the pro and the con, are of equal merit, it can be something that they are judged on and assessed on. I think those tactics are it, and also really kind of setting the stage and saying the expectation for these debates is that sometimes you're taking unpopular views, sometimes you are taking views that are not even your own. Your job as the debater is to just argue that side as best as you possibly can. Tell them to go read that book, Thank You for Arguing, by Jay Heinrichs. If they haven't read it, they can argue anything effectively, because he gives so many awesome strategies for how to do it. Thank You for Arguing is one of my favorite debate books ever. You guys probably all have it already, but in case you don't, it's great. So it really will come down to tactics, I think, one, and then two, just setting the stage that the expectation is that we have a really vigorous exchange of ideas here. But bottom line is, the problem that they're experiencing is a problem we're all experiencing. And if you have any other strategies that you recommend to us, please share.
Awesome. So next question is from Cameron, who asks, how do you determine if a topic is controversial versus offensive or overly controversial?
Boy, again, it's a great question. There's certain topics when we created them, we didn't think were going to be offensive to anyone, and they are. So I'll give an example. We have one about golf. Is golf a sport? And we thought, it's a fun debate. People argue it all the time. It's just a fun debate. Who could be upset about that? Well, we have a pro golfer who's on our board, and she really doesn't like that we have that debate. Like, how could you question this? Of course it's a sport. It's one of the hardest things physical activities a person could do. And we're like, oh no, whoops. The line for what is an appropriate debate and what isn't, I think in most cases, your gut is your guide. There are things like concealed handguns, privatizing Social Security, school uniforms, standardized tests. Like these things, we know intuitively this is fair game. These are actual policy conundrums that we're having in our country, and we want to be able to do what Ben Franklin did. Take a sheet of paper, divide it in half, write pro on one side, con on the other, come up with arguments for and against, so we can come up with some rational solutions for these problems and help our critical thinking faculties get through these tough issues. Some of the more fun things to discuss and debate are a little edgier. And these are things that we as a society are generally uncomfortable talking about. These are things related to income, class, race, age, physical capability. These are often awkward conversations and often unpleasant conversations. I'd say, again, we come to the goal. If the goal is to engage people, then by asking very provocative questions, we may end up doing something counterproductive. Like you'll get a lot of splash at the beginning, but you won't really have a productive conversation, and more people will kind of tune out and will end up feeding the echo chambers rather than getting people to recognize and respect other points of view. So for our part, I'd say we don't necessarily avoid the most controversial of these topics, but we try to look at what has the least edge in presenting the discussions. We want to do that just so we can get the biggest audience participating and recognizing that this really is a neutral space for this kind of discussion to happen. And if they feel like this is just a setup for people to jump on them or harass or bully them, then they don't want to participate. So I don't know if that really answers your question. It's a tough question. It's a good question, but I'd say again, your gut is your guide there.
Yeah, I think intention is really important. Our goal isn't to throw out clickbait and get people really worked up and angry about stuff. Our goal is for people to think critically and debate thoughtfully. So in looking at that, we beat things up internally. We have our civil debates in our staff meetings about these topics, and things also have to have research to back up the sides because we're very research based. We spend a lot of time going through news articles and studies and surveys and polls and anything that we can use to back up the arguments that we're making on each side, so that the things really have to have substance to them.
That's a very, very helpful answer. So it looks like we have two more questions. The first one is going to be a voice one, is from Nora. So I'm going to unmute you right now. Nora?
All right. Hi, I'm Nora. I'm Deputy Director of Political Engagement for the ORV. So two things real quick. First off, I know us politically engaged people are great at holding conversations. So in case we do run out of time, what's a good way to contact both of you with further questions?
Telephone, our main number is right on the website. It's on the bottom of every page, and so is our main email address. But in case you got a pen in your hand now, that's info@procon.org, and their main line is 310-451-9596. We're also on social media on Facebook and Twitter. You can reach us that way as an organization or individually. And if you happen to be in Santa Monica anytime, let's come a knocking.
Yeah, feel free to email me, Tracy@procon.org, TRACEY@PROCON.org.
All right, so our next question is from Christian Martin from the Mid-Atlantic Debate Department. So he's asking, how do we get newer, younger students to feel like they have a voice and their opinions matter, even in a more nuanced debate? In other words, besides just specifically designated novice debates, what are ways that we can encourage those novices to take the chance and speak?
Boy, what a good question. Something that middle school teachers are asking themselves every day. It's an actually great, sophisticated question. Bottom line of it is, I think, it speaks to the nature of how do you compel anybody to do anything, and that there needs to be some incentive in it for them. A lot of times, if they feel strongly about an issue in general, then they're more likely to want to participate. We have a debate topic about flavored milk, and didn't really think that was going to be that compelling, but people care a lot about flavored milk, whether or not there should be chocolate milk in schools, or even whether or not you should sell soda in schools, whether junk food should be taxed. I think the issues that are more relatable to that age group might be more, make for better debates. I mentioned school uniforms. That gets people fired up a lot, and animal testing is one that's generally more accessible for younger audiences. There's a group, gosh, they're based here in Los Angeles. I don't know how national they are or aren't, called the Middle School Debate Society, SDS, right? And they have a topic listing for middle school debaters specifically. That might help with some new areas to explore. But it's, I think in general, it's kind of hard to do. I have a 7-year-old kid, and they have debates in that class in second grade, and in first grade they had debates in that class too, and they would ask whether or not they should have a longer recess or whether they should have more time for reading in class. And those kids got all fired up about it. No, outside, no reading, and they brought up reasons for it, and the teacher had to make sure that they had reasons for all their arguments. And so it can be done. I guess is my point. It can be done, but it'll come down to tactics, I think intentionality and then subject choice.
All right, so we do actually have a couple more questions. I don't know if you guys are kind of running close on time. Do you guys have time for another question or two?
Sure. Yep.
All right, awesome. So I'm going to cut off after these next two questions, but obviously our great panelists have volunteered that you can reach out to them. So if I don't get to your question, I apologize in advance, but please feel free to reach out. So I've got Sydney on right now.
Hi. After going on ProCon.org, I really like your site, and I like how it's actually nonpartisan. There's like things for, like, it's really well done. And anyway, I was wondering what sort of debate resources or books that you would recommend so that we could kind of explore these on our own and kind of get an insight into what kind of things that you read that helped you create such a great site.
Wow. I love that question. I'm going to pull up an image of my recommended reading, and if you want to screenshot it as soon as it's available, go for it. I have given talks at the Reagan Library and the National Council for the Social Studies and various other really major places, and I thought, if I get a chance to address people at that level, I really want to inspire them with some great reading. And so that's why I made this list. And let me see, I call it Books for Personal Growth, and I'm sharing the screen now, Books for Personal Growth. Oops, there it is. For debate specifically, the one that I mentioned that you see on here, Thank You for Arguing What Aristotle, Lincoln, and Homer Simpson Can Teach Us About the Art of Persuasion. That's Jay Heinrichs. I think that's terrific. There's one book, it's really big. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow, but it talks about the intentional brain and the unconscious brain, or the reptile brain and the sophisticated brain. And it talks about ways to really disrupt a debate opponent by using different kind of tactics and strategies and how you communicate. And it's actually something that hostage negotiators can use. So Thinking Fast and Slow, but it's not dense reading, it's just a lot of reading. And speaking of hostage negotiators, one of the other authors that's on this list is Just Listen, Discovering the Secret to Getting Through to Absolutely Anyone. That's Mark Goulston's book. Mark Goulston was a hostage negotiator. He is excellent at de-escalation, at taking language and really using it effectively to make someone excited or to take away the energy from someone's passion. So I think those three probably have the greatest impact for debaters specifically. And the other ones I think are really good just for getting in touch with yourself. And so that the more self-awareness that I think we have as debaters, the more we can empathize with other points of view, the more clearly we can think through some of these issues. I think all these things can help us, not just with debate, but with our lives in general. So the rest of it is more of a inspiration type books. But I think the three I mentioned would be best for debate specifically. Trace, you probably got a bunch too. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll add one recommendation, and it's a book called Getting to Yes. It's one of the first books they had us read when I started public policy school, and it's focusing on negotiating, but not in a zero-sum situation. It doesn't have to be win-lose. Sometimes things can be win-win, and just looking at how to frame arguments in from that perspective. Called Getting to Yes.
Excellent.
Awesome. All right, so our last question is from Patrick, and I'm going to unmute him right now.
So thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today. My name is Patrick, and I'm from Southern California, actually not too far from Torrance. And I had a question. Of course, ProCon.org focuses on a lot of hot-button issues like, say, gun control, et cetera, and I'm not sure if you have a way of measuring, say, how many people who visit your site are in support of versus against a particular issue like that. But I know that one of the struggles we often face is in communities of young people, specifically young high schoolers from the same or similar geographic area, they often have this same or similar opinions on those hot button issues. So I was wondering if you had advice for us about crafting debate topics within issue areas where people's opinions might be homogenous, and crafting topics that will create a vocal, vigorous discussion on both sides.
Boy, what a great question. I'll answer it by showing a couple of resources that I think speak to the point. So I'm showing my screen here. I'm clicking on the videos, watch our videos page at ProCon, and then I'm clicking on this critical thinking seminar and results page. This is our social networking sites good for society and the seminar that we did at UCLA with JSA. What we did for this was a hand vote before our presentation for who was yes, no, or I'm not sure. And then we did the same thing after the presentation. The presentation consisted of small group exercises, large group exercises, and then independent exercises. After the person went through all three of these processes, they ended up changing their minds to some degree. Not everyone did, but you can see what the numbers are. 19% change, fewer pros, 14% more cons, and 100% more unsure votes. So we moved the needle to some degree. We look at that moving the needle as an impact measurement and one that's really important for us as an organization. When we surveyed our own audience and asked them, how many of you changed your mind on an issue based on what you read at ProCon? And I thought, and Tracy knows this, if we got over 5%, we were going to high-five each other, right? And we got to 36%. 36% of people changing their minds based on information, to me, was astounding. You can't do that with weapons, and here we did it with research. I think it says a lot about presenting information in these thoughtful, respectful, side-by-side formats, which is what you would, of course, do. So in these homogenous communities, it's sometimes hard to unseat people from the way that they want to see the world. So for that purpose, I'd say a real effective tactic is to do before and after votes, to do them where they don't necessarily have their name tied to it. They could even vote by text or vote by taking a sticky note and putting it on a pro or a con column. And you just count up how many sticky notes are on which side before and after the debate and see what it is. And then before the debate even starts, to encourage people to say, look, the point of this exercise is to get you to think through all the pros and all the cons. And your conclusion to us is irrelevant. We really just want you to think it through. And if you change your mind, change your mind. And if you're more sure of your position, great. If you're less sure of your position, great. If you thought you were sure and now you really have no idea, that's okay too, because these are really tough issues and people change their minds all the time at the highest levels of our government and as political sophistication. So there's no shame in it. And we just try to emphasize that in the course of our discussions. It's not an easy task, obviously. That's why we have to apply some other types of strategies to unseating those viewpoints. And I mentioned a couple, but I'll also mention a group called Living Room Conversations. They do basically dinner parties to try to get people who don't agree into a room and have a conversation and get them to open up or at least understand and develop empathy for different points of view. On Living Room Conversations website, you can print out, I think it's 2 or 3 page guide to how to ask questions. That might be part of it, just framing the questions a particular way, moderating in a particular way, doing exercises where a pro speaker becomes a con speaker and vice versa, just to demonstrate that these positions can be fluid, and you're modeling what fluidity can look like.
Yeah, I'll reiterate Kami's point that the best cure for the problem you're describing is information. A lot of times people's opinions are based on things that they've heard other people say, and they're just parroting that. And once they actually dive in and do the research, then they form their own opinions. So I think that you'll find that once they start gaining this information and doing the research and really thinking about what their opinions are based on, that you might find more diversity than anyone originally thought.
All right. Well, again, I just want to thank both of you so much for being here and talking with us about ProCon, your experience there, and most of all, your very, very amazing advice on on developing these conversations and how we can better do that with our students as well. I have to say this has been one of the best webinars that I've been a part of in a while. So thank you so much. This information has been so helpful, and also thank you for just providing such a great resource for everyone and our students as well on procon.org, and creating such a great standard that I think that our debate departments can strive to work towards. So thank you so much for everything and for tonight.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys. Keep up your awesome work, JSA folk. We really appreciate it. You're building a nation of smart voters, and we couldn't be more grateful to you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.